Beneath the Mediterranean waves lies a city that controlled an empire's wealth. For over 1,000 years, the legendary port of Thonis-Heracleion, Egypt's essential gateway, was nothing but a rumor from dusty scrolls, a place where myth and history blurred into one. This is the story of its impossible rediscovery. By the end, you will understand exactly how a civilization's most vital hub can simply vanish, and what its silent ruins are desperate to tell us. We will uncover why a single stone slab rewritten the history books, and what catastrophic force could make solid ground swallow a metropolis whole. What does it truly mean for a city to be lost and found again? For centuries, its existence was a whisper on papyrus, a name etched in stories so grand they seemed like fantasy. Ancient writers spoke of a port of unimaginable wealth and strict authority, a place where the entire Mediterranean world converged. The Greek historian Herodotus, writing in the 5th century before the Common Era, described it in his histories. He called it Thonis, a mandatory stop for all Greek merchant ships entering Egypt. Before any cargo could be unloaded, before any trader could set foot on the Nile, they had to present themselves and their goods at this customs house of the pharaohs. It was the ultimate toll booth, controlling the flow of gold, incense, and exotic goods into the kingdom. The taxes collected here funded empires, yet for a place of such documented bureaucratic importance, it left no physical trace on any map for 2,000 years. Then there was the myth, the story that blended this administrative hub with sheer legend. Homer, in his epic tale of the Trojan War, tells of the beautiful Helen and her abductor, Paris. As they fled from Greece, a storm blew their ship off course, and they supposedly found refuge in an Egyptian port named Heracleion, a city dedicated to the hero god Heracles. So you had Thonis, the practical tax port from historical record, and Heracleion, the mythical sanctuary from epic poetry. Scholars debated for generations. Were these two different cities? Were the stories simply allegory? Or was it possible that Thonis and Heracleion were one and the same place, a single, real city that had been remembered in two very different ways? The weight of the written word insisted it was real. The silent, empty sea insisted it was not. This profound contradiction, this gap between the vivid accounts of history and the complete absence of evidence, is what made the eventual discovery so staggering. The legend was not a fairy tale. It was a memory waiting at the bottom of the sea for someone to listen. The answer to this ancient riddle began not with a map, but with a hunch and a very patient machine. In the late 1990s, French underwater archaeologist Frank Goddio made a calculated gamble. He believed the key to finding the lost port lay not in the open sea, but hidden in the vast, muddy shallows of Aboukir Bay, just east of modern Alexandria. His team began a methodical, high-tech search, towing sophisticated sonar equipment back and forth over the seabed. Sonar works by sending out sound pulses that bounce off objects below, painting a ghostly image of the seafloor's topography. For weeks, the scans showed only flat, featureless mud. Then the readings changed. Emerging from the digital gloom were the unmistakable outlines of unnatural shapes. There were long, straight lines that could only be walls, and massive, rectangular blocks that suggested foundations. The sonar was sketching the silhouette of a drowned city, lying in just 30 to 45 feet of water. The data was compelling, but archaeology demands proof you can touch. So the divers suited up and descended into the cool, green haze of the Mediterranean. Visibility was often less than an arm's length, the water thick with suspended silt. They had to feel their way through history, and then a hand brushed against stone not worn smooth by the sea but carved with precision. A diver's light, cutting through the murk, illuminated the face of a colossal statue. It was a pharaoh frozen in time, his stone eyes staring blankly into the aquatic gloom. Nearby, they found the remains of a grand temple, Its columns toppled like giants' toys, and scattered across the seabed coins, jewelry, and ritual objects left as if the inhabitants had simply walked away. The scale was breathtaking. This was not a small outpost or a scattered shipwreck. They were standing, or rather floating, in the middle of a vast metropolitan graveyard. Every careful sweep of a hand fanning away silt revealed another piece of the puzzle. The mythical Heracleion and the administrative Thonis were indeed the same magnificent city, and it had been here all along, preserved in a cold, dark museum of mud and seawater. The discovery was a triumph, but it presented an even more urgent question. How does a city built on solid ground end up 40 feet underwater? What incredible force could cause the very earth to surrender an entire port to the sea? The true scale of the discovery only became clear from above. Lifting a single statue was one thing, but understanding an entire drowned civilization required a god's-eye view of the seabed. The team faced a monumental task. They weren't just excavating a shipwreck or a single building. They had to map a lost metropolis spanning over 110 square kilometers of murky, shifting seabed. To do this, they turned the site into an underwater archaeological grid using a symphony of advanced technology. A vessel would sail precise lines back and forth over the bay, towing a fish-shaped device called a side-scan sonar. This tool sent out fan-shaped pulses of sound to the left and right, painting a detailed, almost photographic image of the seafloor's texture and any objects resting on it. It could distinguish between natural rock and a carved stone block from hundreds of feet away, but the team needed to see beneath the mud to locate objects buried for centuries. For that, they deployed a nuclear magnetic resonance magnetometer. This mouthful of a name describes a brilliant tool. It measures tiny distortions in the Earth's magnetic field caused by buried iron or fired materials like pottery or kilns. Even a single ancient ceramic jar, having been heated in a kiln thousands of years ago, retains a faint magnetic signature that the magnetometer can detect through layers of sediment. Every finding, from a colossal statue to a tiny coin, was then precisely plotted using a differential global positioning system, giving it an exact coordinate within the grand grid. This painstaking pixel-by-pixel process was like developing a photographic negative of a ghost city. Slowly, the map came to life, and with it, the genius of Thonis-Heracleion's layout. The scans revealed a city crisscrossed by a network of grand canals functioning like ancient highways. These waterways connected a massive central port to smaller harbors and basins, where hundreds of ancient ship anchors were found, still embedded in the clay. Distinct districts emerged from the data. Here was the Grand Temple Precinct, a sacred island dominated by the main sanctuary. Over there, clustered along the canals, were the residential and commercial quarters. The map showed where the city's lifeblood flowed. Goods from across the Mediterranean would sail into the main harbor, be inspected and taxed at the customs house, and then be transferred to smaller Egyptian barges to travel up the Nile. This wasn't a haphazard collection of buildings. It was a meticulously planned, thriving port city, a machine built for trade and control. The technological map did more than record ruins. It allowed archaeologists to virtually walk its sunken streets, to understand the logic of its design, and to ask the next crucial question. What did the people who lived in this meticulously planned world leave behind? And what can their personal belongings tell us about the final, terrifying days of the city? Rising from the murky seabed, the first structure to truly announce the city's grandeur was its Sacred Heart. The divers encountered a sight that defied belief, the colossal remains of the Temple of Amun-Jereb. Its massive stone gateways, called pylons, lay toppled but still immense, their surfaces once brightly painted and covered in hieroglyphs declaring the glory of the gods and pharaohs. Flanking these sacred entrances were the giant statues we heard of earlier, depicting rulers in the classic Egyptian pose, arms crossed holding the symbols of their office. This temple was not merely a place of worship, it was the very engine of pharaonic power in the port. Here, in a ceremony of profound political and religious importance, the divine right of Egypt's kings was publicly renewed. This ritual was known as the Pharaoh's Divine Right Ceremony. Imagine the scene in the temple's vast courtyard. A newly crowned pharaoh, having sailed down the Nile, would stand before the priests and the assembled populace. Through a series of sacred rites and offerings within the temple's inner sanctum, the god Amun-Jereb, a fusion of the supreme god Amun and a local deity, would symbolically transfer his divine authority to the mortal ruler. It was a cosmic transaction. The god confirmed the pharaoh as the legitimate son of the sun, the sole intermediary between heaven and earth, and in return, the pharaoh pledged to uphold cosmic order known as Mot. This ceremony was the ultimate source of a pharaoh's legitimacy to rule, and for it to happen here in Thonis-Heracleion cemented the port's status as Egypt's divine gateway. Every ship that entered, every merchant who paid taxes, was doing so under the stone gaze of gods who had personally anointed the king. The temple stones were not just walls. They were the constitutional documents of an ancient civilization lying silent on the seafloor. But if this was the stage for divine kings, where were the actors? The temple precinct held more intimate human clues to the city's final hours. Lying at the feet of the temple's fallen pylons were the silent guardians of the deep. Among the silt and swaying seagrass, divers came face to face with a collection of colossal statues that seemed to guard the ruins. The most astonishing of these was a towering figure, over 5.4 meters tall, carved from a single block of red granite. It depicted the god Hapi, the personification of the Nile's annual flood and the source of all Egypt's fertility. Here was a god of abundance, of life-giving silt and bountiful harvests, now lying dormant on the barren seabed. The artistry was staggering. Despite centuries underwater, the details remained crisp, the rounded, fertile form of the deity symbolizing prosperity, his papyrus plant headdress a clear link to the delta marshes. The scale alone speaks of a city with immense resources and even greater ambition. Moving a stone of that size, quarrying it, transporting it down the Nile, and then carving it with such skill required a fortune and an army of laborers. This was not just a statue, it was a statement of power and piety, meant to be seen from afar by every ship entering the sacred port. Yet the scene was one of profound and sudden loss. These giants were not found standing proudly on their pedestals. They were discovered lying on their sides, often clustered together as if they had been toppled in a single, violent event. One can almost hear the thunderous crash as these multi-ton sentinels hit the ground, the sound echoing through the city's canals before being swallowed by the rising water. Their position is a frozen moment of catastrophe. They tell us that whatever happened to Thonis-Heracleion was not a slow, gentle sinking, it was a dramatic collapse. The guardians fell, and soon after, the city they were built to protect would follow them into the dark. But stone gods are not the only voices from the deep. To understand the daily life that pulsed through these canals, we must listen to the smaller, more personal treasures left behind in the mud. Scattered among the fallen gods, a different kind of stone told a more practical, but no less revolutionary story. In the ruins of the temple, archaeologists uncovered a slab of polished black granite, taller than a person and covered in crisp hieroglyphs. This was the decree of size, often called the Nocrates stele, and it was not a religious text. It was a royal tax code issued by Pharaoh Nectanebo I around 380 years before the Common Era. Its words, carved for eternity, provided the smoking gun that finally solved the ancient name game. The decree is a detailed administrative order, and its key passage is breathtakingly specific. It states that a 10% tax must be levied on all Greek goods entering Egypt through, and here are the exact words, Thonis-Heracleion. In one flawless inscription, the two names were linked forever. proving conclusively that the mythical Heracleion and the administrative Thonis were a single, real-world location. Think of it like finding a modern government document that officially refers to New York City as Manhattan. The scholarly debate that had simmered for centuries was over, settled by a bureaucratic memo in stone. But this stele tells us so much more than just a name. It reveals the city's ruthless economic function. That 10% tax on Greek wine, olive oil, and silver was the lifeblood of the late Egyptian state, a vast revenue stream enforced at the point of a spear under the watchful eyes of the gods. The stone slab paints a vivid picture of a bustling, controlled port. Ships from Athens and other Greek city-states would anchor here, their cargo meticulously inventoried by royal scribes before a significant portion was claimed for the pharaoh's treasury. This was not a suggestion, it was the law of the land, literally set in stone at the entrance to the kingdom. The decree transforms our understanding of the site from a mythical backdrop into a hard-nosed commercial powerhouse, a customs office where history and legend were forged in trade. With its identity and purpose now crystal clear, a darker, more pressing mystery takes shape. What catastrophic force could overwhelm such a wealthy, powerful, and divinely protected city, causing it to vanish so completely from human memory for over 1,000 years? The true measure of Thonis-Heracleion's power was not in its temples but in its water. The city was not built by the sea, it was built for the sea, a labyrinth of harbors and canals designed to process the ancient world's wealth. The central port was a vast, sheltered basin, a man-made lagoon where the water was calm and deep enough for the largest merchant ships of the age to anchor safely. From the air, the sonar maps revealed its staggering scale, with long, protective moles stretching out like arms to embrace incoming vessels. And within these protected waters, the seabed told a frantic story. Scattered across the mud, archaeologists found a forest of stone, not trees but anchors, dozens upon dozens of them, some simple stone blocks with a hole for a rope, others more sophisticated with wooden arms. Each one represents a ship, a voyage, a captain who dropped his anchor here, perhaps for a single night or for weeks of tense negotiation. Mixed with these were the lead stocks of wooden anchors, the heavy cross pieces that ensured the anchor would bite into the seabed, and a rain of bronze coins from Athens, Phoenicia, and other distant ports, lost overboard in the daily chaos of loading and unloading. This was not a quiet dock. It was a sprawling, noisy international marina, a permanent traffic jam of maritime commerce. Every one of those anchors is a frozen moment in time, a vessel carrying olive oil from Greece, silver from Anatolia, or fine pottery from Cyprus, all funneling into this single choke point harbor. For this was the inflexible rule: no foreign ship could sail up the Nile. If you were a Greek trader, your journey ended right here. Your cargo was offloaded, inspected by royal officials, and taxed according to the decree on that black granite stele. Only then would the goods be transferred to smaller, local Egyptian barges for the journey inland to the capital. Thonis-Heracleion was the ultimate border checkpoint and customs warehouse, the sole legal gateway into Egypt for centuries. The din of a dozen languages, the creak of ropes, the shouts of stevedores, and the clink of coins once filled the air where now there is only the silent flow of water. This organized frenzy made the city unimaginably wealthy, but it also made the ground beneath it dangerously unstable. The city's canals served a purpose far greater than commerce. In the shadow of the great temple, divers uncovered another kind of vessel entirely. Resting in the deep silt were the ghostly hulls of ancient boats, their wooden planks preserved for millennia by the oxygen-poor mud. These were not trading ships or fishing skiffs. They were sacred barges, ceremonial boats built for the gods themselves. The largest of these, a breathtaking 60-foot vessel, was found within a specially constructed channel leading directly to the temple of Amun-Jereb. Its wood, though waterlogged and fragile, still showed the craftsmanship of its builders, a flat-bottomed design perfect for gliding through the city's calm, shallow canals. This barge was a floating chapel. We know from inscriptions and practices across Egypt that during major festivals, priests would place the cult statue of a god, a small, portable idol believed to house the deity's spirit, into a shrine on the deck of such a barge. The god would then be paraded through the waterways in a dazzling public spectacle. Imagine the sight, the gilded barge draped in linen and flowers moving slowly through the heart of the city, propelled by priests chanting hymns. Crowds would line the banks, cheering, offering prayers, and bathing in the divine presence as their god floated past. This was religion as public theater, a direct connection between the people and the cosmic powers that governed their world. Thonis-Heracleion was not just a tax station, it was a major pilgrimage site. The discoveries here point strongly to it being a crucial center for the worship of Osiris, the god of the afterlife, resurrection, and the fertile Nile flood. The annual festival of Osiris would have been the city's most important event, a ritual reenactment of the god's death and rebirth that mirrored the agricultural cycle of the land. The ceremonial voyage of Osiris's statue on his sacred barge through these very canals would have been the emotional climax, a promise of renewal for both the land and the people. Every anchor in the harbor speaks of foreign goods, but every plank of these sacred barges speaks of a deep local faith. This dual identity, as both a ruthless commercial gateway and a profound spiritual crossroads, is what made the city's ultimate fate so perplexing. How could a place of such solid faith and formidable wealth simply be abandoned by both man and God? The city's two names were not a contradiction but a conversation. For the Egyptians who built it, this place was Thonis, a name rooted in their own language and cosmology. It was a practical, powerful name for a strategic customs port. But for the Greek merchants, sailors, and travelers who arrived there by the thousands, the city presented a different face. They saw a grand metropolis dedicated to a hero they recognized, the mighty Heracles, whom the Egyptians associated with their own god Khonsu. So they called it Heracleion. This was not an error or a case of mistaken identity. It was a brilliant act of cultural translation, a diplomatic bridge built from a name. Imagine a Greek captain, weary from his voyage across the Mediterranean, finally sighting the towering statues and temple pylons of the port. He would not be entering a strange, foreign place called Thonis. He would be docking at Heracleion, a city that honored a figure from his own pantheon. This made the unfamiliar familiar. It made trade possible. The dual identity reveals the city's true genius. It was designed to be understood by two worlds. The Egyptians maintained their absolute political and religious control, collecting their taxes under the watchful eyes of Pharaoh and Ammon. Yet they allowed, and perhaps even encouraged, the Greeks to see a reflection of themselves in its sacred landscape. This was more than just good business, it was sophisticated statecraft. A single physical space could hold two parallel realities, two names for the same streets, the same temples, the same bustling docks. The discovery of the decree of size, that black granite slab, was the ultimate proof. By officially using the compound name Thonis-Heracleion in a royal Egyptian document, the pharaoh's scribes were acknowledging this shared reality. They were codifying the bridge. So the mystery of the two names dissolves into a profound truth about the ancient world. Connections were not just about exchanging goods, but about exchanging ideas, finding common ground in myth and stone. This port was not just where cargo was transferred from ship to barge. It was where cultures met, negotiated, and found a way to speak the same language without ever saying the same word. But what was life like in this city of two names? The colossal statues and royal decrees speak of gods and pharaohs, yet the true heartbeat of Thonis-Heracleion was found in the smaller, more intimate treasures scattered across the seabed. Archaeologists sifting through the mud uncovered a world of personal luxury and daily toil. Delicate gold earrings and rings, some inlaid with precious stones, slipped from fingers or lost in the chaos, tell us of a wealthy elite who adorned themselves with fine things. Intricate pottery, from elegant Greek drinking cups to sturdy Egyptian storage jars, paints a picture of homes where imported wine mixed with local custom. Small bronze statuettes of gods and goddesses, likely used in household shrines, speak of private devotion amidst the public spectacle. And simple tools, fishing weights, weaving spindles, carpenter's chisels remind us that this was a living, working city, not just a ceremonial center. The city's canals were its main streets, and along their banks would have stretched a continuous, bustling market. The air would have been thick with the smell of spices, fresh fish, and baking bread. Vendors hawked goods from across the known world. You could hear a babble of languages: Egyptian, Greek, Phoenician, perhaps even early Arabic, as merchants haggled over the price of Athenian olive oil, Tyrian purple dye, or Nubian gold. A Greek sailor, his coins freshly exchanged, might purchase a carved amulet of the Egyptian god Bes for protection on his voyage home. An Egyptian priest leaving the temple precinct could stop for a cup of fine imported wine served in a clay cup from Cyprus. This was a cosmopolitan hub, a place where a diverse population of traders, sailors, priests, artisans, and administrators lived, worked, and intermingled every single day. Their homes, likely built from mud brick with timber supports, would have lined these active waterways. A successful merchant's house might have a courtyard and rooms decorated with frescoes, his wealth displayed in the foreign goods he kept. A priest's residence closer to the temple might contain scrolls of ritual texts and a small personal altar. The artifacts show that people here lived well, connected to a vast network of trade that brought them the best the Mediterranean had to offer. Yet all this vibrant daily life, this chorus of commerce and culture, was happening on borrowed time. The very ground that supported this thriving metropolis was secretly, slowly turning against it. The seabed of Thonis-Heracleion was paved with money. While the statues spoke of divine power, the true, tangible wealth of the port was found in countless small, glittering objects sifted from the silt. Divers recovered a staggering hoard of over 2,000 gold coins, many minted in the time of the Ptolemaic dynasty, the Greek rulers of Egypt after Alexander the Great. These were not just loose change lost overboard. This was concentrated capital, the hard currency of an international marketplace. Holding one of these coins, you would feel the weight of pure gold. See the profile of a Ptolemaic king or queen stamped with meticulous care. Each one represented a transaction, a tax paid, a shipment purchased, a sailor's wages. They flowed through the city like water, and in its final collapse, a fortune in gold literally spilled onto the seafloor, frozen in the moment the economy stopped. Alongside this royal currency were the tools of daily trade. Dozens of exquisitely crafted bronze weights were discovered, many in the shapes of animals like bulls and rams, or even the heads of gods and goddesses. These were not decorative trinkets, they were the certified measures of the ancient world, used on scales to weigh out quantities of incense, grain, or precious metals. A merchant would place a weight shaped like the goddess Hathor on one side of his balance scale, and carefully add silver dust or lumps of frankincense to the other until they matched. The use of divine imagery on these weights was a guarantee of honesty, an invocation of cosmic order into the act of business. It meant that in Thonis-Heracleion, even the simple act of weighing a purchase was a sacred contract. Then there were the personal treasures, the items that slipped from fingers in panic or were left behind in haste. Delicate gold earrings, some with intricate grapevine designs, were found nestled in the mud. Rings set with stones like carnelian and lapis lazuli, materials sourced from as far away as Afghanistan, speak of a fashion-conscious elite with access to global markets. A simple cosmetic spoon carved from ivory hints at the private routines of daily life. This incredible variety tells a profound story. The coins come from the royal mints of Egypt. The jewelry styles blend Greek and Egyptian artistry. The raw materials for the stones and metals were pulled from trade routes spanning 3 continents. Every single artifact, from a gold coin to a tiny bead, is a data point on a map. Together, they chart the city's position not just on the geography of the Mediterranean, but at the very center of the ancient world's economic web. This was where wealth pooled, was counted, weighed, and sent onward, making the city's sudden silence all the more deafening. The gold coins and sacred barges of Thonis-Heracleion were not final destinations. They were links in a chain. For the exotic goods that flooded into its harbors, the journey had only just begun. To reach the heart of Egypt, they had to travel up the Nile, and that required a crucial partner. Just over 50 miles to the east, situated on the canopic branch of the Great River, lay the Greek trading colony of Naucratis. While Thonis-Heracleion was the mandatory maritime gateway, Naucratis was the interior receiving station, a permanent Greek foothold established with the blessing of the pharaohs. These two cities formed a powerful commercial duo, a one-two punch that controlled all foreign access to the kingdom. The process was a marvel of ancient logistics. A large Greek merchant ship laden with amphorae of wine and olive oil would anchor in the deep water port of Thonis-Heracleion. Its cargo was offloaded, meticulously inventoried by Egyptian customs officials, and the royal tax was taken. But that heavy, deep-drafted sea vessel could go no further. The Nile's shifting sandbars and shallower channels were treacherous for such ships, so the taxed goods were transferred onto smaller, flat-bottomed Egyptian barges specifically designed for river travel. These local boats, poled by Egyptian crews who knew the river's every mood, would then begin the slow, winding journey inland. Their destination was the bustling wharves of Naucratis. There, the goods entered a different world. Naucratis was not just a warehouse, it was a thriving, self-governing Greek city within Egypt. It had its own temples to Greek gods like Apollo and Hera, its own potter's workshops producing fine ceramics in Greek styles, and its own markets where Greek merchants lived and traded. The goods from Thonis-Heracleion would be distributed here, either sold directly to Egyptian buyers from across the delta, or repackaged for the final leg of the journey south to the capital at Memphis or even Thebes. This partnership was a brilliant compromise. The pharaohs maintained absolute control at the coast, collecting their vital revenue and preventing foreign military ships from ever entering the Nile. Meanwhile, by granting the Greeks a dedicated city upriver, they fostered lucrative trade and kept foreign merchants conveniently contained in one area. Thonis-Heracleion handled the intimidating official first contact. Naucratis offered a familiar, welcoming base of operations. One city was the locked outer gate, the other was the inner courtyard. The prosperity of each was utterly dependent on the other, a symbiotic relationship that funneled the wealth of the Mediterranean directly into the treasury of the pharaohs. For centuries, this system was the bedrock of Egypt's foreign economy, but it also meant that the entire delicate network had a single, vulnerable point of failure: the coastal gateway itself. The glittering coins and bustling docks of Thonis-Heracleion rested upon a fatal flaw. For all its wealth and divine protection, the city was built on a foundation of betrayal. The entire Nile Delta, the lush, fertile land that gave Egypt life, is not solid ground at all. It is a colossal accumulation of sediment, a vast, wet sponge of clay, silt, and sand deposited by the river over thousands of years. When the city's founders chose this strategic spot at the river mouth, they saw a perfect, sheltered harbor. What they did not see, or perhaps chose to ignore, was the unstable, waterlogged earth beneath their feet. The city's massive stone temples, its heavy statues, and its dense urban footprint all pressed down on this saturated, compressible ground. For centuries it held, but it was a precarious equilibrium, a city living on borrowed time. Then, around the 8th century of the Common Era, that time ran out. A perfect storm of natural disasters converged to deliver the final, crushing blow. First, a slow, relentless force was at work. Global sea levels were gradually rising, a process that continues today. This meant the Mediterranean was literally creeping higher, placing increasing hydraulic pressure on the water table beneath the city, further weakening the already soggy foundation. Then came the sudden, violent triggers. The region is seismically active, sitting near a major fault line. A significant earthquake, or perhaps a series of them, struck. The shaking itself could topple columns and statues, but the real horror happened beneath the surface. The seismic energy violently agitated the water-saturated soil. In a process known as liquefaction, the solid ground instantly lost its structure. The individual grains of sand and silt suspended in the water stopped supporting each other. In mere moments, the earth upon which Thonis-Heracleion stood transformed from a solid into a liquid slurry. It was as if the land itself turned to quicksand on a monumental scale. Entire city blocks, weighed down by their own stone, would have lurched, tilted, and then been swallowed as the foundation literally flowed out from under them. Compounding this, some scientists theorize the earthquake may have also generated a local tsunami. A wall of water surging into the bay would have scoured the already collapsing structures, filling the canals with debris and saltwater, and delivering the final, drowning blow to a city already being consumed by the earth. The process was not a single, overnight event, but likely a catastrophic series over decades. A major quake and liquefaction event would cause massive, immediate subsidence, plunging whole districts several meters. Subsequent floods, storms, and smaller tremors would then nibble away at the remains. The canals that were the city's lifeblood became its tomb, channeling the rising sea into its heart. The people who survived the initial disasters would have faced an impossible reality. Their homes were cracking and sinking. Saltwater poisoned their wells and fields. The grand temple of their gods was tilting into a lagoon. There was no engineering fix, no prayer that could reverse the liquefaction of the world beneath them. They gathered what they could and fled, leaving their city to the waves. Within a few generations, the once bustling port was a memory, then a legend, and finally a blank space on the map. Its fate was a grim lesson written in geology. A civilization can build monuments to outlast eternity, but if it builds them on ground that cannot hold, eternity will claim them far sooner than anyone could ever imagine. This catastrophic liquefaction, while sealing the city's fate, performed one final paradoxical service. The same thick, waterlogged silt that betrayed the city's foundations became its perfect preserver. As buildings collapsed and toppled into the canals, they were quickly engulfed by a soft, smothering blanket of fine sediment carried by the Nile's floods and the churning of the sinking land. This layer of mud, several meters thick in places, created an anaerobic tomb, an environment almost completely devoid of oxygen. And in the absence of oxygen, the agents of decay are starved. The wood-eating worms, the mollusks that bore into stone, and the bacteria that break down organic matter simply cannot survive. This is the preservation paradox of Thonis-Heracleion. The very force that destroyed the city also miraculously saved its most fragile treasures from the ravages of time. While the exposed faces of the great stone statues show the wear of currents and the gentle, relentless etching of seawater, the objects buried deep in the mud were frozen in a state of suspended animation. Divers have recovered items that would have vanished without a trace on any dry land site or even on an exposed seabed. They found intact wooden furniture legs, the grain of the timber still visible. They brought up delicate woven baskets, their intricate patterns preserved, still holding the seeds or fruit they carried over 1,000 years ago. They discovered papyrus documents, the plant-based paper of the ancient world, which normally dissolves in water. Here, sealed in the anoxic mud, the very ink on the papyrus remained legible, a ghostly record of a mundane contract or a religious text. Even food remains, like ancient nuts and grains, were found looking as if they had been stored just yesterday. Each of these organic fragments is a direct, intimate thread to the city's last day. That basket wasn't placed in a tomb for the afterlife, it was dropped. The papyrus wasn't archived, it was lost. This gives the site an almost haunting immediacy. We are not looking at a curated display of a culture's greatest hits prepared for eternity. We are witnessing a snapshot of a city interrupted. The position of the artifacts tells a story of sudden abandonment. A collection of bronze vessels, perhaps from a temple treasury, found stacked together as if ready for transport that never happened. A small, personal amulet lying next to a doorway slipped from a neck in a moment of panic or haste. The sediment did not just protect these objects, it captured the emotion of the final hours. The contrast on the seafloor is stark. A colossal granite head of a pharaoh, exposed to the open water for centuries, has a softened, featureless surface where marine life has made its home. Just a few meters away, buried in the same protective silt, a wooden comb retains every single one of its teeth. This duality is what makes the site so extraordinarily complete. We have the monumental architecture, worn but recognizable, and we have the ephemeral details of daily life perfectly preserved. It is as if the city took one last, gasping breath, and the mud held it in place, waiting for us to listen. The silent artifacts point to a faith that was anything but quiet. Among the most profound discoveries in Thonis-Heracleion were those linked not to the living but to the dead and to the god who promised rebirth. This city was a crucial center for the worship of Osiris, the lord of the afterlife. For the ancient Egyptians, Osiris was not a distant, fearsome deity. He was a relatable figure, a murdered king who was magically restored to life by his wife Isis, becoming the ruler of the underworld and the source of the Nile's life-giving flood. His story was the ultimate metaphor for the cycles of nature, death, and renewal that governed their world. And in Thonis-Heracleion, they didn't just tell this story, they performed it year after year in a grand public spectacle known as the Mysteries of Osiris. The archaeological finds bring this ritual vividly to life. Divers recovered a collection of exquisite ceremonial instruments, including delicate silver ritual trays and tiny, intricately carved faience chalices. These were not for everyday use, they were sacred vessels used by priests during the festival's most secret and potent rites. Most telling of all were the discoveries of dozens of small, ceremonial bricks made of gold-tinged faience, a glazed ceramic. These Osiris bricks were central to the ritual. According to texts, they were used to create a small, symbolic garden bed. Into this sacred soil, priests would place a mixture of Nile silt and barley seeds, forming an effigy of the god himself. This Osiris bed was then watered and tended. The sprouting barley represented the resurrection of the god, a literal, living symbol of life emerging from death. Imagine the powerful sight for the pilgrims who flocked to the city for this event. They would witness a procession carrying the sacred effigy from the great temple to a ceremonial tomb, reenacting the god's funeral. After days of mourning and secret rites, the priests would reveal the sprouting grain, and the city would erupt in celebration of Osiris's victory over death. This was not passive worship, it was participatory theater on a divine scale, designed to fill every person with hope and assure them of life beyond the grave. The city's identity comes into sharp focus. It was the ruthless customs gate where your goods were taxed, and it was the spiritual gate where your soul's journey was celebrated. One hand took your gold, the other offered you eternity. This duality made Thonis-Heracleion indispensable, which makes its neighbors' reactions to its sinking all the more revealing. The city's role as a spiritual and commercial gateway made it invaluable to whoever ruled Egypt. When Alexander the Great conquered the land in 332 before the Common Era, and his general Ptolemy later established a Greek-speaking dynasty, Thonis-Heracleion did not fade away. It entered a new golden age. The Ptolemaic pharaohs, though Greek in origin, were astute politicians. They understood that to control Egypt, they must embrace its gods, adopt its royal imagery, and above all, command its trade. The port at the mouth of the Nile was the perfect instrument for this project. Under the Ptolemies, Thonis-Heracleion transformed from an Egyptian customs house into a vital Greco-Egyptian naval and economic base, the primary point of entry for the dynasty's ambitions. The artifacts from this period tell a fascinating story of deliberate cultural fusion. Divers have recovered statues of Ptolemaic queens carved from dark granite in the traditional Egyptian rigid style, yet their faces bear subtle Greek features, a softer, more rounded jawline, hair styled in waves reminiscent of Hellenistic art. These are not purely Egyptian or purely Greek portraits. They are hybrid creations designed to be read by both populations. To an Egyptian subject, this was a familiar depiction of a divine queen, a successor to Hatshepsut or Nefertiti. To a Greek sailor or administrator, it was a recognizable likeness of his ruler, grounded in the artistic traditions of his homeland. This visual diplomacy in stone was a masterstroke, reinforcing the Ptolemies' legitimacy without forcing one culture to completely submit to the other. The city thrived on this fusion. Coins minted by the Ptolemies flooded the port, facilitating trade across an even wider Mediterranean network that now stretched to their other territories like Cyprus and Cyrene. The harbor would have buzzed with not just merchant vessels but also the warships of the Ptolemaic navy, one of the most powerful fleets of the age. Thonis-Heracleion was their first line of maritime defense and the secure funnel through which the wealth of their kingdom flowed. Inscriptions from the time show the city's temples were generously endowed by the Greek pharaohs, who continued and likely amplified the sacred festivals like those of Osiris to cement their connection to the native priesthood and people. Life in the city during these centuries would have been a vibrant tapestry. A Greek soldier stationed at the garrison might make an offering at a shrine to Serapis, a god invented by the Ptolemies that blended Osiris with Greek deities like Zeus. An Egyptian priest serving in the same temple of Amun-Jereb his ancestors had, would now see Greek-style statues of the ruling family placed alongside traditional ones. The economic machinery hummed louder than ever, now feeding the colossal new capital of Alexandria just along the coast. For nearly 300 years, this delicate, prosperous balance held. The port stood as the physical embodiment of the Ptolemaic experiment, a Greek crown resting on an Egyptian body, sustained by the endless flow of goods and faith through its canals. Yet this period of hybrid vigor also marked the city's final, flourishing chapter before the ground itself withdrew its support. Even as the ground grew unstable, life stubbornly clung to the canals. The mud of Thonis-Heracleion holds a final, quieter chapter of its history, one written not in grand statues but in everyday clay and bronze. Scattered among the older Egyptian and Ptolemaic ruins, archaeologists have recovered a telling collection of Roman artifacts. There are fragments of distinctive red gloss pottery known as terra sigillata, its smooth surface stamped with maker's marks from Italian workshops. They have found the long, pointed handles of amphorae, the ceramic shipping containers of the ancient world, which once held Roman wine or olive oil. And mixed with the older Ptolemaic gold coins are later issues of bronze, bearing the profiles of emperors from the early centuries of the Common Era. These are not the treasures of a thriving capital. They are the scattered leftovers of a place in gentle decline, evidence that the port never experienced a single clean break. Long after the great temple had begun to tilt and the grand processions had ceased, people still lived and worked here. The harbor, though increasingly difficult to navigate, still saw occasional ships. A Roman merchant might have unloaded his cargo on a crumbling dock, trading with a community that remembered the city's former glory, but now lived amidst its gradual subsidence. The story these later artifacts tell is one of a slow, inevitable transfer. As Thonis-Heracleion's harbor basins filled with silt carried by the Nile and its land sank further, the practical center of gravity for trade and worship simply shifted eastward following the receding coastline. The beneficiary was its older neighbor, the city of Canopus, situated on the same canopic branch of the Nile but slightly further inland. Canopus had always been a famous religious center and a lively port in its own right. As the waters around Thonis-Heracleion grew shallower and more treacherous, Canopus, with its deeper and more stable access channels, naturally absorbed the remaining maritime traffic. What had been a twin port system became a single destination. Canopus flourished in the Roman period, becoming notorious in historical accounts for its festive, decadent atmosphere. Pilgrims and traders who once would have landed at the great gateway of Thonis now sailed a little further to the bustling docks of Canopus. The process was likely so gradual that no one living in Thonis-Heracleion would have marked a final day. It was a slow fading. A family might repair their home one last time, then decide to move to firmer ground near Canopus. A priest might transfer a sacred statue to a new sanctuary. Season by season, the population dwindled. The last residents were probably not officials or wealthy merchants, but fishermen, potters, and farmers who used the crumbling stonework for shelter and the silt-choked canals for small boats. The final abandonment was not an event but a conclusion. Sometime around the 8th century, after a major seismic event likely delivered the coup de grace, the last person looked back at the waterlogged ruins, now more lagoon than city, and did not return. The sea, which had been the source of its immense power, had finally reclaimed its price in full. The silent ruins now held a new question for the modern world. How do you begin to raise a civilization from the seabed? Raising a city from the seabed is an act of controlled, suspended chaos. The divers working on Thonis-Heracleion do not descend into a clear, sunlit ruin. They enter a world of perpetual twilight and tactile confusion. At a depth of 45 feet, the water is a thick, green soup of suspended silt. Visibility can drop to zero in an instant with a single misplaced fin kick, leaving an archaeologist working completely blind, navigating by touch alone in a space where a priceless artifact and a random rock feel identical. This is not a gentle environment. The Mediterranean currents sweeping into Aboukir Bay are strong and unpredictable, capable of pulling equipment from a diver's grip or slamming them into a fragile stone surface. Every minute on the site is a battle against the elements, a race against the clock dictated by air supply and human endurance. The excavation itself is a ballet of extreme precision performed under extreme duress. They cannot simply dig with shovels. To remove the tons of sediment covering the ruins, they use a tool called an airlift. Picture a giant underwater vacuum cleaner. It is a long, rigid tube that reaches from the seabed to a support vessel on the surface. Compressed air is pumped into the bottom of the tube, creating a rising column of bubbles that sucks up loose silt and sand, carrying it up and away. The operator, a diver, must guide the mouth of this powerful suction device with immense care, millimeters at a time, to avoid damaging any hidden object. It is a painstaking process of revealing history grain by grain, and when something emerges from the mud, the real work begins. Nothing can be moved until it is fully documented in situ, meaning exactly as it was found. A team of underwater photographers and surveyors must capture the object from every angle, noting its precise relationship to the stones around it. They use waterproof slates to sketch its position, and specialized mapping software to plot its three-dimensional coordinates within the site grid. Only after this digital record is perfect can the delicate task of recovery begin. A small statue might be carefully lifted by hand. A multi-ton stone block requires inflatable airbags slowly filled to provide neutral buoyancy, so it can be gently floated to the surface under the control of a team of divers. But surfacing is just the beginning of a new, equally demanding journey. An artifact that has spent over 1,000 years in stable, cold, anoxic mud undergoes severe shock the moment it leaves the water. The wood of a sacred barge, waterlogged for centuries, will begin to shrink and crack catastrophically if it dries out. A corroded bronze coin can literally disintegrate when exposed to air. This is where the unseen, years-long labor of conservation begins. every object is immediately transferred to a conservation laboratory where it is kept wet and stable. For organic materials like wood or papyrus, this means a years-long process of chemical treatment, often involving baths in a water-soluble wax that slowly replaces the water in the cells, preventing collapse. Metals require electrolytic reduction, a process that carefully reverses the chemical corrosion. A single statue can take a team of conservators over 5 years to stabilize. This monumental effort, from the blind diver in the silt to the scientist in the lab, is a testament to a different kind of teamwork. It is a partnership between human intuition and cutting-edge technology. Underwater communication systems allow for constant dialogue between divers and the surface command. Three-dimensional photogrammetry software stitches thousands of underwater photos together to create perfect digital models of structures before they are moved. This is not treasure hunting. It is forensic science conducted in an alien environment, a deliberate, generation-spanning project to interrogate a drowned city and piece together, fragment by fragile fragment, the story of its life and its dramatic end. The journey of a statue from the seabed to a museum is a resurrection in slow motion. Once an artifact is raised, its greatest danger is no longer the sea but the air. For a colossal granite head that has rested in cold, salty water for over a millennium, the sudden change is a violent shock. The first stop is a temporary tank on the support vessel, filled with fresh water to begin the most critical and tedious step, desalination. The stone is not solid, it is porous, and over centuries it has absorbed a tremendous amount of salt from the seawater. If it were allowed to dry normally, those salt crystals would expand as they crystallized inside the stone's microscopic pores, causing it to flake, crack, and eventually crumble from the inside out. So the statue begins a bath that can last for over a year. It is submerged in a series of freshwater tanks, and the water is changed regularly. Conservators monitor the salinity, waiting for the day when the water reads almost pure, signaling that the salt has finally been drawn out. Only then can the stone be allowed to dry, slowly and under controlled conditions without the threat of self-destruction. For metals, the process is a battle against chemistry. A bronze coin or statuette pulled from the seabed is often a crumbling, crusty mess, covered in a thick layer of corrosion products called chlorides. Left unchecked, this bronze disease will continue to eat away at the metal even in a dry museum. To save it, conservators use a method called electrolytic reduction. They place the artifact in a chemical bath and run a very low electrical current through it. This process gently reverses the corrosion, converting the destructive chlorides back into stable metal over weeks or months. It is a form of controlled scientific alchemy. The most delicate rescue operation is reserved for organic materials. A piece of wood from a sacred barge is essentially waterlogged pulp, its cellular structure entirely supported by the water inside it. If that water evaporates, the cells collapse and the wood shrinks into an unrecognizable, twisted wreck. To prevent this, conservators use a method called freeze drying. The wood is first treated with a preservative like polyethylene glycol, which strengthens the cell walls. Then it is placed in a vacuum chamber and frozen solid. In the intense vacuum, the frozen water inside the wood sublimates, turning directly from ice into vapor without ever becoming a liquid. This bypasses the damaging liquid phase, allowing the wood to dry while retaining its original shape and size. The entire process for a single large timber can take several years. Take the magnificent red granite statue of the god Hapi, for instance. After its careful lifting, it spent over 18 months in desalination baths. Conservators then meticulously cleaned its surface with soft brushes and dental tools, revealing the crisp hieroglyphs and subtle carving that the sea had hidden. Today, it stands in a museum not as a ghost from the deep, but as a solid, tangible piece of history. Its journey from murky oblivion to luminous display a testament to invisible decades of work. This silent transformation in the lab is the final, essential act of archaeology, giving a lost city back its voice, one conserved artifact at a time. These painstakingly conserved artifacts tell only part of the story. The true resurrection of Thonis-Heracleion is happening not in a lab, but in the digital realm where light has replaced water. Today, anyone with an internet connection can glide through its silent canals and stand before its toppled gods, thanks to a revolutionary process called photogrammetry. This technique begins with the thousands of detailed photographs taken by divers during every excavation. Swimming in a careful, overlapping grid pattern, they capture every inch of a statue, a column, or an entire temple wall from every conceivable angle. Back on the surface, powerful computers take over, running sophisticated software that analyzes these images. The algorithm searches for common points in the photographs, matching the corner of a stone block in one image to the same corner in dozens of others. By triangulating these points from different perspectives, the software calculates precise three-dimensional coordinates. It stitches this data together, pixel by pixel, to build a flawless digital twin of the underwater ruin. The result is not a simple drawing or an artist's impression. It is a hyper-accurate, measurable 3D model that captures every crack, every erosion pattern, and every carved hieroglyph in exact detail. For archaeologists, this is a transformative tool. They can now study the site without the constraints of dive schedules, weather, or visibility. They can take virtual measurements between objects, examine the joinery of stone blocks to understand ancient engineering, and even simulate how structures collapsed. They can peel back layers of sediment digitally, exploring stratigraphy without ever touching a trowel. It allows for perpetual re-examination, inviting new questions to be asked of old stones from anywhere in the world. For the public, this technology is a portal. Museums and research institutes like the one led by Frank Gaudio have created breathtaking virtual tours. With a click, you descend into the green haze of Aboukir Bay. You navigate around the colossal statue of Hapi, seeing the water-worn texture of the granite as if you were there. You can float through the grand temple precinct, looking up at the towering pylons from a diver's perspective, or hover above the site for a god's eye view of the ancient urban plan. These tours often include interactive hotspots where clicking on an artifact reveals its story, its conservation process, or a historical context. It democratizes discovery. A student in Tokyo, a history enthusiast in Buenos Aires, or a retired teacher in Copenhagen can all now share in the awe of exploration, experiencing the weight and wonder of this sunken world from their own homes. This digital resurrection does more than preserve, it reanimates. It turns a silent, inaccessible ruin into a living classroom and a global monument, ensuring that the story of Egypt's gateway is not locked away in academic papers or deep water, but is open for exploration by all. Yet for all we have uncovered, the silent city still guards its deepest secrets. The grand temples and statues are only fragments of a much larger picture. We have yet to find the true seat of power, the royal palace or the governor's mansion that must have existed to oversee such immense wealth and traffic. Where did the port's ruling elite live and conduct their high-level diplomacy? The administrative heart of the city, the archive buildings that held the papyrus records of every ship, every tax paid, and every cargo logged remains elusive. Imagine the ledgers that could rewrite economic history, the treaties and correspondence that detailed relations with foreign powers. Those documents, if they ever existed on papyrus, may have dissolved long ago in the water, or they could still be waiting, sealed in an undiscovered, oxygen-poor pocket of mud. Their absence is a profound silence at the center of the story. Another great mystery swirls around the precise sequence of the final disaster. We understand the mechanics of liquefaction and rising seas, but what was the final straw? Was it one massive, region-shattering earthquake, or a relentless series of smaller tremors over decades that finally broke the land's back? Can we pinpoint the event to a specific year or even a season? The scattered artifacts suggest a rapid abandonment, but did the people have hours, days, or weeks to flee? The answers lie in the subtle layers of sediment, in the precise angles of fallen columns, and in the geological cores drilled from the surrounding seabed, each one a tree ring of ancient catastrophe waiting to be read. And then there are the people themselves. We have their tools, their jewelry, and their gods, but we know shockingly little about their daily rhythms beyond the docks and temples. What did a typical family home look like? What songs were sung in the taverns that surely line the canals? How did the mixed population of Egyptians, Greeks, and others navigate marriage, law, and community? The personal stories, the names and faces of the city's last residents, are whispers lost to the water. These are not just academic puzzles, they are the missing pieces of a human experience. Every unanswered question is a compass point for the next generation of divers and scientists. The search for the palace, the analysis of seismic silt, the hope for a sealed archive. These mysteries ensure that the story of Thonis-Heracleion is not a closed book on a museum shelf, but an ongoing conversation with the past. The city may have finished sinking centuries ago, but our understanding of it is still rising. The true legacy of Thonis-Heracleion is not measured in gold, but in control. For centuries, this was not merely a port of call, it was the absolute choke point for an entire civilization's foreign wealth. Every ounce of Greek silver, every amphora of wine, every exotic luxury that entered the kingdom had to pass through its customs house, be weighed on its divine scales, and surrender a tenth of its value to the pharaoh's agents. This single, waterlogged site was the valve on the pipeline feeding Egypt's economy. Its discovery forces us to redraw the mental map of the ancient Mediterranean. We can no longer picture a simple, open network of trade routes dotted with independent harbors. We must now see a system with a mandatory fortified gateway. All roads, or rather all sea lanes, led to Thonis-Heracleion if you wanted access to the Nile. This centralizes power in a startling way. It means the pharaohs did not just influence trade, they commanded it with a bureaucratic and military grip that began 40 feet underwater at the river's mouth. The city's physical layout, with its guarded basins and canal checkpoints, was the architectural expression of this monopoly. To control the gateway was to control the kingdom's lifeline. This control shaped cultures as much as commerce. The city's dual identity, its existence as both Thonis and Heracleion, reveals a sophisticated, premeditated diplomacy. The Egyptians were not passively hosting foreign visitors, they were actively managing them. By allowing the Greeks to see a reflection of their own hero god in the sacred landscape, they created a psychological bridge. A Greek merchant could feel a sense of familiarity and divine favor in a land that was otherwise utterly foreign and tightly regulated. This was a masterstroke of soft power. The Ptolemaic period deepened this fusion, but the foundation was laid centuries earlier. The discovery of the city rewrites the timeline of Greco-Egyptian relations. It shows that deep structural integration was not an innovation of Alexander the Great's successors, but a practical reality that had been operating successfully long before they arrived. This was not a clash of civilizations, but a deliberate, profitable entanglement. The port was the laboratory where these two great cultures negotiated a shared reality, forging a hybrid identity in stone, ritual, and everyday market life. Ultimately, the silt of Aboukir Bay preserved more than statues, it preserved a paradigm. Thonis-Heracleion stands as the definitive proof that in the ancient world, geography and political will could combine to create a node of overwhelming importance. Its silent canals whisper a lesson about the nature of empires. True power often resides not in the glittering capital, but in the unassuming checkpoint where the world is filtered, taxed, and allowed to pass through. The city's rediscovery pulls this essential, gritty, administrative reality from the realm of historical theory and plants it solid and dripping before our eyes. It forces us to replace romantic visions of freebooting traders with a clearer, more compelling truth of controlled exchange, cultural translation, and a gateway that held the keys to a kingdom. But the story does not end with its rediscovery. The same sea that preserved Thonis-Heracleion for over 1,000 years now presents new, modern dangers that threaten to erase it all over again. This is not a static museum exhibit, it is a fragile site under constant siege. The most immediate threat comes from the very industry that once gave it life, fishing. Modern trawler boats dragging heavy-weighted nets across the seabed to catch bottom-dwelling fish operate in these waters. Those nets do not discriminate between a mullet and a millennia-old column. They can snag on protruding ruins, toppling delicate structures and scraping carved surfaces into blank stone. Each pass of a trawler is like running a bulldozer through an archaeological dig, shattering context and history in an instant. Then there is the silent plague of looting. The location of the site is no secret, and the temptation of sunken gold is a powerful lure. Unscrupulous divers, armed with modern metal detectors and suction dredges, can descend under cover of darkness to pillage the seabed. They are not interested in context or preservation, only in quick profit. A looted coin sold on the black market is a data point forever lost, a story ripped from the intricate tapestry of the city's history. Their work leaves behind craters in the sediment and a scattered, meaningless collection of artifacts divorced from their story. Pollution adds a slower, more insidious layer of damage. Agricultural runoff from the Nile Delta, rich in fertilizers and pesticides, flows into the bay. This chemical soup fuels algal blooms that cloud the water, reducing the visibility for legitimate archaeological work and encouraging the growth of invasive marine organisms. These creatures, like certain mollusks and algae, can attach themselves to the stone surfaces. They bore into the rock or secrete acids that slowly, relentlessly dissolve the very carvings that have survived for centuries. The statues that withstood earthquakes are now being eaten away by a microscopic biological assault. Perhaps the most daunting threat, however, is the one that echoes the city's original demise: climate change. Global sea level rise is accelerating. As the Mediterranean creeps higher, it increases the water pressure on the already unstable layers of sediment holding the ruins. This can trigger further subsidence, causing buried structures to shift and collapse. More powerful and frequent storms, driven by a warming climate, churn up the seabed with increased force, scouring exposed artifacts and burying others under sudden, suffocating layers of silt. Coastal erosion on the nearby shoreline also changes the underwater currents, which can then sweep away the protective mud that has been the site's greatest guardian. The race is now a poignant paradox. We are in a desperate sprint to fully understand the city before these combined forces dismantle it. Every season of excavation is a battle against time and entropy. The priority has shifted from spectacular discovery to urgent documentation. Using photogrammetry and detailed mapping, teams are creating a complete digital record of the site, a high-resolution backup of history. This virtual city may one day be all that remains if the physical one succumbs. The work of protection is just as critical. This involves complex negotiations with local authorities to restrict harmful fishing practices near the site, constant monitoring to deter looters, and international cooperation to track and recover stolen artifacts. It is a global effort to safeguard a shared human heritage. The silent stones of Thonis-Heracleion survived one apocalypse. Their message now is an urgent plea against a slower, more complex one. They remind us that discovery is not a final act, but the beginning of a responsibility. The city waited 15 centuries for us to find it. The question is whether we can act quickly enough to ensure it is not lost again, this time not to nature's violence but to our own inaction. From a whisper on papyrus to a city resurrected from the deep, the journey of Thonis-Heracleion is a testament to the enduring power of human curiosity. This was Egypt's legendary gateway, a place where myth and receipt were stamped on the same stone, where the divine authority of pharaohs was affirmed and the wealth of continents was counted. Its discovery solved a puzzle that had taunted historians for generations, proving that the stories were not mere allegory, but faded memories of a real, thriving metropolis. More than that, it unveiled an entire lost world of cultural fusion, sophisticated logistics, and a faith that sought eternity, all preserved in a silent, underwater tomb by the very catastrophe that destroyed it. The city's stones tell us that history is not a simple narrative, but a layered, complex conversation between the land, the sea, and human ambition. Today, this conversation continues, but it requires listeners. You can be part of this ongoing discovery. Seek out the virtual tours that let you walk its sunken streets. Support the organizations dedicated to the painstaking science of underwater archaeology and share these stories. Remember, the past is not always buried in dust. Sometimes it waits in the deep, and the greatest secrets of our shared history may still be lying hidden, patient and silent beneath the waves.